Hi everyone, and welcome back. In this lecture, we'll continue looking at some more text-based functions inside of Excel. Last time, we looked at the left, right, mid, and find functions. And as mentioned, in this one, we'll have a look at the trim, concat, length, and case functions. And in this lecture, we'll also be using the same dataset as last time. So let's start by having a look at the trim function. The trim function can be used to remove any unneeded white space from a string. And white space, in the context of a string, is basically just a collection of spaces. In a lot of cases, you might receive data that contains some unneeded white space. And an important part of the data cleaning process is to remove or trim this extra white space. We'll cover data cleaning in much greater detail later on in the course, but trim is just a generally helpful function to introduce to you now. To demonstrate how to use trim, I'll add in a few extra spaces to the start of our first row in our order placed column. So just in front of Monday here, I'll add in 2 spaces. And as a result of these extra spaces, we can see that our day column has been affected. And this is one of the issues that can arise from having extra unnecessary white space in your data. We will now use the trim function on this cell to get rid of these extra spaces. So let's move over into a blank cell and enter our function. So we have equals trim, and then all we need to provide is our text, which will just be our cell of C2. And in this trimmed cell here, we can see that the extra space at the start of our cell has gone. So let's copy our trimmed value and paste it back into cell C2 as the value only, so not copying the formula. And now our day function is back to working as expected. Next, I'd like to introduce you to the concat function. And concat is used to join 2 pieces of text or 2 cells together and merge them into one. At the start of our dataset, we have 2 name columns. We have our first name and the last name. And let's now use the concat function to concatenate or join our cells into a full name. So I'll create a full name column over here off to the right, and then below this we'll set up our concat function. If we start typing in the function name, we'll see 2 options here. So we have concat and concatenate. And note here the little triangle on concatenate. Concatenate was replaced by concat, but the function is still available just for compatibility reasons. But it is recommended to use the newer concat function. And if we look at the description here, we can see that all it does is concatenate or join a list or range of text strings. And for our arguments, all we need is to provide it with our text. So we'll select cell A1 for our first bit of text. We'll enter a comma to move on to the next argument. And then for the second bit of text, we'll provide cell B2, which is our last name. And then if we hit enter, we can see that our first name and last name cells have been merged into one. Currently though, there is no space between the 2, so this is something that we'll need to add in manually. So let's go back to our function, and after our first text argument, we'll add in another argument. And this argument will simply be a space, which will of course we'll have to add this inside of quotes as you're working with a string. And now if we hit enter, we get our full name, but this time with a space in between. And let's just fill this in for the rest of our rows. And okay, see there, that's working perfectly. The third function I'd like to show you in this lecture is the len function. And this is a very simple one, and all it does is it returns the number of characters found in a string. So if we use this here on our first name cell for Alice, we'll just get an output of 5. And this is because there are 5 characters within Alice's first name. And then if we change it over to Bob in the cell below, we get an output of 3. Finally, we have our case functions. Again, these are super simple functions that only require 1 argument. So our 3 case functions are lower, upper, and proper. These functions are used to change the case of our data. So if I just make a quick string here, and we'll call it casing example, and I'll give it a little bit of weird capitalization, we can then go through and use these 3 case functions to change the casing of our string. Starting with lower, this function will convert a string into all lowercase. And as mentioned, it only takes 1 argument, which is the text. Upper works in the same way, with only 1 argument, but converts the string to all uppercase. And then finally, we have proper. And this converts our string into proper case, or otherwise known as title case, where the first character of each word is capitalized, as we can see here. Okay, and great job. These are all the main text-based functions that you'll need to know when working with strings in Excel. In the next lecture, we'll continue looking at functions, but with a focus on date-time functions instead. So I'll see you in the next lecture.